Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You are listening to the Startup Selling Show, talking sales with Scott Sambucci. That's me. Today's episode is a guest episode, and today's guest is Monica Stewart. So here's the details about Monica and why you want to be listening to this episode. So over the last 10 years, Monica has been building sales teams for 3 different B2B tech startups, a couple of which I know you've heard of. One is called Panjiva, which was acquired by S&P Global. Second is Trello, I know you've heard of, acquired by Atlassian. And the third is RedIQ, which was acquired by Berkshire Hathaway. Noticing a trend here? She knows what she's doing when it comes to sales and growth. After doing that for 10 years, working at these different startups, leading sales teams, she decided in 2018 to shift away from working at startups and instead helping startup founders and their sales teams reach their goals in the fastest possible way. She wanted to get out of the day-to-day grind and get to the heart of what was going on to drive meaningful results. I can relate. This is exactly why I left the startup world, and instead of being a VP of sales, instead coaching company founders and their sales team. So today, now over the last few years, Monica has helped over 100 companies unlock their next level of growth. And she's delivered well over $20 million in revenue and $100 million in value creation. Today's topic, of all of the things that we could have talked about based on her expertise, the one topic that she said she absolutely wanted to share with the audience is the topic of account management. Account management. Now, not probably the sexiest thing that you will be listening to, at least from the topical standpoint, right? It's not prospecting, it's not lead gen, it's not about running demos or closing the sale or hiring your next VP of sales. However, in today's environment, especially in today's environment where the macroeconomic factors are creating a lot of hard decisions for your customers, decisions as to whether or not to even move forward with you. For the customers you do have, are they going to stay working with you, or are they going to be cutting back the level of work and the amount of work they're going to be doing with you? Or some customers altogether might be doing harsh enough cutbacks that they might need to cancel because they're not seeing the value or the return on investment when it comes to working with you and your company. So that's one of the key reasons we wanted to have Monica come in and talk about account management. The topic of account management covers everything from onboarding and implementation to product adoption and success, all the way through to expansion, upsells, and resales. And these are all topics that we covered throughout the course of today's conversation. A couple of things to listen to. First, we did talk a little bit about the concept of product-led growth and how there's a little bit of a myth out there when it comes to what does it take to actually implement a product-led growth strategy, and specifically for companies like Trello, where again, she was responsible for part of the sales work there, how Trello, even though they had 10 million users, only 1% of those users were actually paying them. And part of Monica's work was talking about how to make sure that those customers are unlocking value so that they could unlock 6-figure contracts with those same users and instead sell to those big companies at the enterprise level. All of that started with account management, customer success, adoption, and understanding exactly what Trello was doing for them at their company. So that was kind of our dovetail into account management. From there, we talked about the concept of hyper-specialization. You're all familiar with this topic of how we have kind of chopped up the sales process and the customer success process into an assembly line. Monica talked quite a bit about some of the downfalls of that. What are some of the risks from a company standpoint to deliver a hyper-specialized sales process? But most importantly, she talked about how hyper-specialization is actually not good for customers. So you want to listen to that part of our conversation for sure, and what she calls the post-sales motion. The next thing we talked about was what we very politely referred to as the South Park model, and how many companies out there are following the South Park model of account management, and that's not a good thing. So make sure you listen to her description of the South Park model of account management and how to avoid following that South Park model as part of your account management and customer success process. And then from there, we talked about the importance of having a customer journey post-sales, not just a buyer journey up until the point where they sign the contract, but actually mapping out a customer journey post-sale, because not enough companies are doing that. She posed the question that we should be asking ourselves, who are the friends that we need to have at an account over the course of a year in order to get that resell and in order to get that account expansion opportunity? Talked about some strategies for that. And then we talked about the importance of thinking of customer success and onboarding and account management in a parallel process around onboarding, adoption, and expansion, not a sequential process. So again, you want to listen for that as well. And then finally, she talked about the concept of highlight moments, the highlight reel that you want to build with your customer over the course of time so that they're super clear as to the results and the success they're having because of their work with you. So lots of stuff jam-packed into this episode, all related to account management. So make sure you're listening in, take some good notes. And most importantly, if you want to get some of Monica's help with this, two ways that she shared at the end of the episode on how to get in touch with her. I'm going to share them with you right now so that you have them. Number one is via LinkedIn. So find Monica Stewart on LinkedIn and you can DM her. Her company today is called 5 Limes. It's the number 5 followed by IVE. So basically 5 replaces the F. So 5, number 5, IVE Limes, like the fruit.com. Her email address is monica@5IVELimes.com. So shoot her a note, shoot her a LinkedIn DM. She's got tons of resources that she shares totally free on account management, expansion, onboarding, everything account management related, plus all other parts of your sales process. So definitely take advantage of Monica's generous offer to help you and share this frameworks by shooting her a DM on LinkedIn or sending her an email to monica@5, the number 5, IVELimes.com. All right. I think that's enough of an intro. You've heard enough to keep listening. Let's do this. On to my conversation with Monica Stewart. Hey, Monica, good to have you on the show.
Hey, Scott, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm excited to have this conversation. You and I met last year, and we've had a couple of conversations about sales and startups and everything that's going on in the world. So I'm thrilled that we're able to get some time with you on the Startup Selling Show today.
Yeah, me too. One of my favorite topics.
Good. Well, like I do with all of our guests, I want to start with a really simple question that seems simple, but sometimes it's difficult for people to answer. So you obviously have a huge amount of success and a history of helping startups with their sales and go-to-market and leadership and account management. But today, like if people say, hey, Monica, what do you do? How do you describe that for people?
Great question, Scott. So, I mean, as you said, I've kind of, done it all. I started as an individual contributor way back in the day, and I've had pretty much every job you can have in a sales org. And I would say that now what I really focus on is working with companies that are moving to a fundamentally different level in their growth. And I kind of help them focus in on the most impactful things to get them there and help them get everything else out of the way.
So you're being modest because you've built sales teams for 3 different companies that have been acquired. So
That's
one
right.
company was acquired by S&P Global. A second, at Trello, you were acquired by Atlassian.
Yep.
And then the third, RedIQ, was acquired by Berkshire Hathaway. So it's not like you're just like helping sales teams. Like these are huge exits for all of those companies into a much bigger organization.
It works. Well, what I see with most companies that I start with is that they're doing a lot of things and they're doing a lot of things pretty well and they're doing some things really well. And I find that it's, finding those things that you can do really well and going all in on that gets you to that acquisition and makes you a real standout in your field.
That's interesting. And I'm just curious, since we're on the topic here, for those 3 startups, it was Panjiva, Trello, and RedIQ. Did you see a consistent theme that each 3 of those did the same things really well, or was it different at each one of those companies?
That's also a good question. I mean, I would say that the outlier in those 3 was Trello. And, to be fair, I joined pretty late in their journey. I was there for their last year before acquisition. And I think that, the real genius of Trello is in their product-led growth. We had some huge wins on the enterprise side, which is what I really focused on, enterprise sales. And I think that was kind of the thing that they needed to be able to show that there was more to the business than just, the organic growth that was happening from the product side. But, we had at that time, I think we had like 10 million users and like 1% of them were paying, So, and that's a very significant amount of revenue. But if you look at the potential of the product overall, it's like, you want to keep growing the user base. And then, some of them are going to pay you $10 a month. And then you'll get some of them to pay you like, $300,000 a year, but that's going to be like 20 companies. So I can't take credit for the entire Trello thing because the product team there are just absolute superstars. I would say that with Panjiva and with RedIQ, it was really thinking about the business in a fundamentally different way. So when I joined both of those companies, they were really focused on acquiring customers that would build their ecosystem. In an interesting way, they were kind of both marketplace plays in completely different industries, right? One is in multifamily real estate, and then the other is in global supply chain data. And I think that the shift that really changed things for both of those companies was when we were able to understand that what we were doing, it was providing an enormous level of top level data that allowed people not only to be able to make decisions about their own businesses, which is like level one, but would allow people to get broader insight into that market or that industry as a whole. And for Panjiva, that's where we were really able to tap into, the super, super, super enterprise plays. When I joined, my team was happy if they sold a $4,000 annual deal. And by the time I left, we were regularly closing like, $100,000 plus deals on the new business side. Wow. And the expansion even more than that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd love to hear that. And, whether it's Panjiva, where you're going from 4,000 to 100,000, or like the example of Trello, 1% of 10 million users are paying. That's data similar to Evernote that I've read. Evernote has something like for every 100 customers, one of them is actually paying the premium.
Right.
I happen to be one of them. I love Evernote, and I know Phil Loveman, he's a great dude. And so the notion like, product-led growth, there's a lot of talk about product-led growth right now in the enterprise world. And they point to people like Slack or Trello or these others, Atlassian in general, people talk about. And what they forget is like, no, actually, there's a whole lot of selling that goes on there.
A whole lot of selling that has to go on. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people are not really super realistic with themselves about what their TAM actually is and what the viral potential of their product actually is, right? So if you look at a product like Trello and Slack, they both have virality built into the product. For Trello, it's a natural sharing thing. And the thing about Trello was not even that people would invite people to their Trello boards and they would share that way. There was an insane amount of user-generated fan content that was created about Trello. Like most of our marketing was literally done by our users. Many of them weren't paying us. And they would make these elaborate musical videos with like high production value where they would sing like Hello by Adele, but it was about Trello just because they loved the product so much. And to be able to replicate something like that is extremely difficult. Like, I don't think that anyone at the company thought that that would happen, and then with Slack, of course, Slack is meant to be used in teams. But then of course, the genius about Slack is that you have the admin logs, and that's how you're able to sell to the CTOs and the CISO. And that's how they're able to really get in and, start to unseat something like Microsoft Teams. So there's actually, it seems simple, but it's not easy. And it's like, if you're selling a product that is designed to be used, for example, only by sales teams, like, I'm sorry, you're just not going to unlock that level of growth because there are only so many B2B sales teams in the world. Like these are products that like a Burning Man camp can use Slack to organize their camp for the year. And I mean, these things are used by church groups, like they're used by families, they're used by literally anybody. So you need to have that sort of like entry point, I think, to be able to really grow into like, the tens of millions or hundreds of millions.
Yeah, I love that perspective. One of the guests we're going to have coming up pretty soon is a guy named Wes Bush, who is a product-led growth expert. And maybe we'll have to have you on the show and talk about that specific topic as well, since you've had so much experience with it. Using maybe Trello as a segue into one of the main topics I wanted to talk with you about and leverage your expertise. You talked about the users loving the product so much that they're making these videos and like sort of like fawning over how good this product and as good as this company is. And so that's, I think, the dream for I know for me, I'd love it when clients post stuff on LinkedIn about our coaching program, or I love it when clients are happy to give us testimonials so that it can help us get more clients like them. And so I really wanted to dive into of all the things that you've done, I want to dive into your expertise around account management and what you're seeing out there in terms of what are some of the mistakes that that the individual companies are making? What are some broad brushstrokes of like perceptions and observations you have about account management? And obviously you want to get your, perspective on some ideas for people listening when it comes to account management. What are some things that they could put into action listening to this podcast? So if you're up for that, I got a couple topics you and I chatted about before the show. And by the way, for people listening, just so you know, there were literally pages of notes that Monica shared with me just on the topic of account management. And I was going through them. I'm like, this is so good. And we're like, how the heck are we going to cover this in 40 minutes? And the answers were not.
Not,
There's
yeah.
probably like 4 days worth of content and topics that we could be talking about.
I
So
was saying this to my boyfriend last night. I was like, I'm going to do this podcast tomorrow. And I think it's actually like a 3-hour workshop, but
no, it's probably like a
yeah.
3-day workshop and probably 3 years to implement everything. But that's okay. Where people are going to get a ton of value out of this conversation. And there's kind of 3 main topics that you and I kind of zeroed in on. One is on this concept of hyper-specialization that we're seeing out there in the marketplace, especially starting with the sales funnel with SDRs and BDRs all the way through to account management. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about what account management should look like or needs to look like in today's world with the economic conditions that are out there and the pressure that companies are feeling. And then the third thing I'd like for you to want to make sure we make space for at the end is the components of the client journey on the customer success account management side of things. So you've got this 3-step framework. So those are the big 3 things that we can spend maybe 10 minutes on each of those. I think that'll be a huge win for us today. So,
that sounds great.
So talk to me about hyper-specialization. What do we mean by that? And how is it affecting account management right now?
Absolutely. So, when I was starting out in sales, Scott, way back in the day when, I called people from the phone book, but I'm not that old, but something like that. Like most,
I did.
most teams, you were kind of expected to learn most of the functions of the role, right? You got a lead list that your boss found, sent to you in Excel, and then you had to go find that contact information, call those people, get them interested, write your own sequences, do the discovery call, do the demo, do the close, do the whole thing. Sometimes even follow up on your own invoices. And then over time, as we start to get into the heyday of VC-backed B2B SaaS, and people are chasing amazing valuations and amazing, revenue ceilings, and they're achieving them. One of the ways that teams were able to do that was by starting to break things down into really small pieces. So it becomes like this sales assembly line, right? So you're like, okay, we've got inbound leads, and those go to the MDRs. And then if they're SAL, then they go to the BDRs, and then they do a disco call. And then that goes to the senior AE, and then they do another discovery call. And then you have the sales engineer and they do the demo. And then, then you want to bring in your team lead for the close. And then after that, then it goes to your customer success, to your account manager. And then they work with the account for the first 6 weeks. And then it goes to customer success. And then the account manager talks to them 9 months later. And then that's kind of like what your typical, mid-market and above sales process looks like at a lot of companies right now. And I think that there's a lot of reasons that has worked. It enables a lot of scalability because you only have to onboard people for one specific thing, right? Like you're going to come in, we're going to teach you these 3 tools, you're going to talk to people, you're going to figure out this, and then you move on, right? So you can get someone up and running on a process like that in like under a month for sure. You don't have to teach them like the whole mission and vision of the company and get them to own the whole customer process. Great. It also enables a lot of repeatability, which allows for better planning, better resource optimization, and candidly, there's a lot of other companies that have really benefited from this because the other thing that this requires is a whole other layer of technology for the rest of your team, the other functions, and also leadership to be able to understand what the hell is going on within an account because there's nobody who has the entire story. Who has the entire story? Gong, Slack, Salesforce, SalesLoft, right? Outreach.io. And so, there's a real incentive actually for a lot of people to continue to encourage this type of model because they've profited a lot from it. So, I think those are some of the factors that kind of led us to where we are now. So it's been great for sales orgs in a way. It's certainly been great for recruiting firms, and it's certainly been great for sales tech. And it's been great for a good number of VCs. But it hasn't been great for customers. I mean, candidly, it also hasn't been great for a lot of people that are entering the sales world today or have entered the sales world in the last 5 years. I saw a discussion on Modern Sales Pros last night. It was like a very serious debate about whether you should bring a BDR to an in-person customer QBR. And about half the people were on the side of no. And it's like, okay, well, if we're telling people that there's really a career path to sales here, and there's no way in hell, even if they totally overperform, that they're ever going to be able to actually go and meet a customer in person and see the end result of the work that they did, then how are we actually preparing them to eventually move into a closing role or move into any kind of leadership role, right? Like, how are they going to, how's that going to like happen? So, there's that. But then from the customer side, you have all these functions that are touching an account, and they're all reading sales advice on LinkedIn, and they all want to be consultative, and they all want to provide value, and they don't want to be transactional. And so they're all asking a million questions, and they're really trying to like uncover the pain. And then the customer has to go through that process all over again. And they do that with 6 people. And then by the time they get to the end, they're like, okay, look, I just want to implement this thing.
Can you just turn this thing on for me?
Just do it already. Like, it's just it's an auto dialer. Like, let's just do it.
Right.
And the other thing is that a lot of it, most people are not really like enabled and empowered to really serve the customer because they're only able to touch this tiny little piece of it. So then by the end, you have customers that get to the end of the sales cycle, and then they're sort of like dumped into the onboarding and customer success and account management side of the business, which is like a whole other thing. They sit like over there. And then so much of the information that was captured in the process is never able to be transferred, because it's not like they can even just sit down with the rep and sort of have a debrief. I mean, you'd have to sit down with 5 people, most of whom talked to that customer like twice, maybe 5 months ago. I mean, there's just no way that you're going to get really anything useful out of that. And so I think that means that a lot of what we really want to accomplish in the post-sales motion, which is, that's when you're actually driving the value of your product. It's not in the demo, it's in the actual use of the thing. They're really kind of doing that at a disadvantage because they don't really understand very much about that company's business. And by the time the company gets to them, they don't really want to talk about it anymore. They just want to like do the thing, right? And so I think that that's one of the reasons why, now you're seeing a lot of people all of a sudden really starting to freak out about the situation that they've actually put a lot of their customers in. And they're very, very, very nervous about churn. And they're very, very, very nervous about adoption. And it's a problem that started years ago. And so it's not a problem that you're going to be able to fix, immediately. And I would say that what I've just described is probably the scenario that you're looking at for like your Series B and above. On the other hand, you've got teams, smaller teams, let's say you've got, like 10 account managers or less, where you're trying to get them to pack like 3 to 4 functions into one role. So like it's your onboarding person. They're supposed to do client reporting, both internally and back to the client on the usage. They're supposed to be strategic thought leaders. And then they're also supposed to jump in and like twice a year at the 6-month mark and at the end of year mark, sort of do like some kind of like renewal or expansion thing. And so what that means is that if you look across your team, you're probably going to have like some people who are good at 2 of those things, and it's going to be a different 2 things for each of the people. And then some balls are going to be dropped at any given time. And that's usually going to be either reactive based on whatever fire is going on with the account, or just sort of based on whatever it is that they feel comfortable doing. So you've also got a very uneven experience that's happening across the account. So it's sort of like, in both scenarios, I think that we're really asking a lot of our post-sales teams, and they're not really appropriately resourced in most cases to be able to be the person that's actually driving the lifetime value of your customer relationships.
All right, folks, we are off and running in my conversation with Monica Stewart. We're talking a lot about systems when it comes to account management and finding gaps and opportunities to improve in your overall business processes. And guess what? That's exactly what we do here at Sales Qualia each and every day for early stage, growth stage, B2B tech startups. So if you're an early stage startup, say you're at a seed round or an A round, and you're looking to build a more repeatable, scalable sales process across your process, not just for account management, for everything from lead generation through to how you're running your product demos and doing your customer discovery, to handling objections, thinking about your pricing, and then of course, onboarding customer success and everything that comes with building out your sales team. Those are things that are top of mind for you over the next 12 months. We should talk. And the easiest way for us to have a quick chat, I'm happy to hop on a phone with you for a quick 20-minute jam session. All you got to do is shoot me an email. Email address is Scott, SCOTT, salesqualia, Qualia.com, Scott@salesqualia.com. Just type the word private as a subject line. Lets me know that you want to have a quick chat, a private chat about your sales process. We'll run you through what I call a situation session. In those 20 minutes, I'm going to give you a quick read on your current situation in terms of where you are relative to where you want to be, work on a few ideas in that call. And then if it makes sense to have a longer conversation about how the team and I here at Sales Quality can help you build those repeatable systems so you can get scalable growth, we can do that too. So most important thing for you to do right now, if you're listening to this on your phone, which you probably are, open up your email, shoot me an email, Scott@salesquality.com, type private into the subject line. That'll let my assistant know that this is coming from this conversation that I'm having with you right now. And she can set up a time for us to have that 20-minute jam session. We'll have our private one-on-one situation session. So that's it for now. Let's head back to my conversation with Monica Stewart. After that very uplifting perspective on account management in today's world, the state of account management, other than that, by the way, there's a meteor that's about to hit the earth in the next 30 days. There's a lot there, but everything you're saying, like, I've seen it, I've witnessed it with, people complaining about things on posts like, sales pros, modern sales pros, and on LinkedIn. And these are issues that our clients have, because even before they get to 10 account managers, a lot of times the founder is the account manager, and they're just trying to get that whole part of their work off their plate. They're just trying to find a CS person, some kind of customer success person that can do everything post sale. And so, on both sides of the spectrum, you have the hyper-specialization, like you just talked about, where everybody's doing a lot of stuff. In the middle, you have these account managers that everybody's doing everything, but nobody's doing any of that really well.
Yeah.
And those poor founders that are just getting their first 10 or 20 customers and their first $1 million in revenue, they're just trying to find somebody who can make customers happy.
Yes.
So
yes. Yeah.
Given all that, like, what would be a couple of quick prescriptions, or is there anything else that you wanted to share to add to this very positive viewpoint on? I know you have, I'm just being a little facetious here, but it's true, right? We're just speaking the truth about what's going on out there at account management, and your customers are feeling it. Like, I think about myself, like, there's nothing worse than having a call with somebody that it's like, okay, fine, yeah, SDR is going to talk to me and do a qualification. Sure. And then you get a call with the AE and they ask you the same things.
Right.
And then you go to onboard and the third person's involved and they're like, oh, let me show you how to set up this integration. You're like, I don't want that. Actually, we don't use Salesforce. Mm-hmm. I told your BDR that, and I told your AE that. That's not the system we use. We don't need that integration. We need other things. And it's just like, God, are these people even listening to me? Yeah,
they're like, here's a pre-recorded video because you only paid us $8,000. Like, what is that? Yeah. I guess to add to that, I've been thinking about this for quite some time, actually. I think my background is that I'm always looking for ways to really push the limits of the customer relationship with all the companies that I work with. I think that's, where you find like what your true value is and like what the true potential of your company really is. And you have to have really a growth engine to be able to do that, because 8 times out of 10, it's not going to happen in the first sale. You don't have the track record. They don't have the relationship with you. You haven't built enough trust. It's oftentimes those customers that have been with you for a while that you can kind of go back to and be like, okay, we're doing this thing. This is good. And now I want to talk to you about something else. And there's a little bit less pressure because they don't feel like you're trying to close them immediately because they're like already in the door. And so I think it's a really valuable thing for companies to be able to build. So I've been doing this with my clients, even the ones where I'm mainly working with the new business team for quite some time. And then the other reason that I think about it a lot is that I spent 3 years basically running the consulting program at a consulting firm called Scaled. Mm-hmm. And my first job there was, we were kind of moving from a model where I was actually the second person to join the leadership team besides the CEO and then one other person. And it was sort of us, like doing everything. And then we had other consultants that we were working with. And in the first year that I was there, we grew an insane amount. And so all of a sudden we had, new consultants that we were bringing on board. We had different types of projects that we were doing. We were running 30 to 40 projects at a time. And I had to figure out really quickly how to actually make that work. And the sales process for a services business is pretty short. It's the doing of the thing where you're actually driving the most value. So I actually ran this process myself for everything from like a a couple $1,000 sales loft implementation all the way up to like our biggest strategic projects, and kind of figured out like what were the levers that you needed to do for each one. And, I tried a lot of things that weren't successful and kind of eventually hit on a format that was. And so I've seen how this can be applied to all different types of businesses. And I think, the biggest mistake that companies make is like, if you look at your cost of sale and you look at what's really going to drive unit economics, which is the biggest thing that CEOs and sales leaders should be concerned with right now. Your cost of acquiring a new customer is obviously going to be really high if you just look at that first contract value, but it's the LTV that's really going to get you there. But most people think about this. We were just talking about the South Park model of sales, where it's like you do
the South Park account management model.
The South Park account management model. Yeah, you blow their minds, you bring in the CEO, you close the deal, and then you hand them off to your customer success team. And then 1 to 3 years later, question mark, question mark, question mark, and then LTV profit, and it's like, you need to really understand what's happening in those interim stages in order to be able to realize the value that you want to get from each of those companies.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know the South Park reference, you can look up South Park and Underpant Gnomes. Underpants Gnomes is the episode. Stage 1, steal underpants. Stage 2, stage 3, profit. And it's like, what's stage 2?
LinkedIn course.
One of my favorite episodes. So that's why we called it the South Park account management model. So if we're now kind of filling the gap here, we've outlined all the problems, all the challenges, all the issues, how to avoid the South Park model here in this case. What are the things that companies should be doing from a process standpoint, and especially in today's world where customers are really at a premium, like the ones you have, you want to keep, you want to avoid the, we're going to scale back because of budgets, or we're going to cancel the contract early because we ain't making cutbacks. What should teams be doing to fill those question mark parts of their account management process?
It's such a good question. I think this is what everybody wants to know, right? And I mean, not to give you like another meteor moment here or anything, but it's kind of a longer term fix. And so, I'm seeing people say a lot of things now, like they're like, oh, I think that we should take our sales team and move them to account management, or we should take like, the best people from both teams and put them in charge of current customers. I think that this is a disaster, like both from an internal morale perspective and also from a customer experience perspective. Right? Like, you've had people who have been suffering in the trenches, putting out all the fires, dealing with all the messes that the AEs gave them. And now you're just going to be like, sorry, you're not good at bringing in revenue. Like, you're out. We're going to bring in that sales guy that's been giving you a hard time for the last 2 years. Not the vibe. And of course, from a customer perspective, like, you're not going to take away the person that they were given and then give them a salesperson to run their account. I mean,
well, there's some moral hazard there too, like, or just the trust factor. It's like, okay, now you're giving me a salesperson as an account manager. Is this person really like my advocate as a customer, or are they here to like sell me stuff?
Yeah, because
I really liked Julie when she was a sales rep. I really liked Bob when he was a sales rep.
Yes.
But I knew they were the sales rep. Now, what's the incentive for them to want to get on a call with me?
Yeah. And I mean, does Julie and Bob want to start spending 60% of their time doing like, user adoption and thought leadership sessions that lead to no revenue? Probably not. No matter, even if you change their comp, so they're making the same, like those functions are just wired differently. And so it's amazing to me to see this because it's so incredibly short-sighted. And I think it just shows how much people have not been thinking about this up until this point. I don't think that there are any quick fixes, candidly. I think that what you need to do is most companies are going to need to re-engineer their entire process. The good news is that the sooner you do it, the sooner it will start helping you. And then when we go through, another downturn after this one in the next 2 years or 4 years or whatever it is, then that won't be your main challenge anymore. So there's a couple of things that I see that people need to really be optimizing for, which is we have these amazing buyer journeys in the sales process, right? Where it's like, this is the content that they're going to engage with. And this is where they enter our funnel from marketing. And this is what we're doing on LinkedIn to speak to them. And we're sending them presents and customized videos. And it's like this amazing process. And then, that sort of ends at a certain point. And what I would like to see more companies doing is starting to map out their buyer journey for the entire customer lifecycle, right? Which continues on to, what happens after the first close, because there are going to be many closes, like a renewal is a close, an upsell is a close.
I even think of retention as a close in a sense, because there might be an opt out or buyer's remorse phase, and while they're not going to give you more money, they're still deciding. Just because they signed the contract doesn't mean they're 100% bought in. They could still be like 80% bought in, and they're like, your option is better than not doing anything for now,
for
or
now,
better than the other options that I know of. But to your point, if this doesn't go well, I'm going to pull the plug because of budget sensitivity, because of my reputation, because of my objectives I need to get done. If this isn't working out, like, I'm not going to stick to the contract. Sorry.
That's right. Exactly. I mean, and would you look at any other relationship that way? Like when you get married, are you like, okay, work's done. Like, this is it, just autopilot from here on out,
Well, it depends on the marriage, I guess.
Hopefully not, right?
But not a good one.
Yeah, that's probably, maybe there's going to be some churn there later on. So, I think like the kind of the three components of the client journey, like post sale, are you have to look at, what is the onboarding and implementation experience? How do we get the thing in their hand, make sure that it actually gets off the ground, which is a huge deal for a lot of companies. There was one company that I did a lot of work with in the last couple of years that had it was a really great product that they were selling to talent acquisition teams, sometimes also internal comms or DEI groups. And so we would get a lot of people buying our product because they wanted to do one project. And then our challenge was to actually get it implemented as a tool and not just for the one thing that they bought it for. And I think there's actually a lot of products that have that issue. Trello had that issue too. So the first thing that you have to think about is like, how are we doing a proper onboarding? And what that often means is really reselling the team on what they bought, because you've got, 5 to 7 decision makers involved, right? At like the mid-market to enterprise level, maybe a couple more, but a lot of them disappear after you close that sale. They're your legal, your finance buyers, your procurement buyers. They're not going to be involved, but you have this whole new group of buyers that are now going to be involved, who are going to be your end users and your advocates. And they haven't been in all those discovery calls and demos. So you need to really like get them excited about it again. And then you need to make sure that that motion is followed through. I would say go ahead.
Sorry, I was thinking about something. Keep going and then I'll jump in.
Okay, cool. So then the third one is like you have your adoption and success motion, right? So once the thing is set up and if they're using the Salesforce integration or not, how do you make sure that people are integrating it into their day-to-day where it's appropriate? And how are you making sure that they're getting the early wins and the quick wins that are going to make you sticky? Think about the way that people adopt any habit. Like if you decide that you want to start running every day or join a gym or learn a martial art or something like that, you don't just get a gym membership and walk into the gym and then it's like the process is done. Like you need to be you need to feel good about what you're doing. You need to feel like you're making progress. You need to see changes in order for you to continue with that habit. And then the third is your expansion motion. And so what I would say is probably going to be the biggest shift for a lot of companies is not thinking about those things as linear things. So if we look at the process of like what a post-sales motion looks like right now in many SaaS companies, those stages are actually broken down by timescales, right? So it's like, okay, so our first 6 to 8 weeks after closing the contract is when we're doing onboarding and implementation. And then after that, for the next 6 months, we're focused on adoption and success. And then, oh my gosh, we have our QBR, or we have our, our end of year review for our renewal. Now we're going to start an expansion conversation 9 months in. And then let's see how that goes. And, as I'm sure you can guess, just kind of from logically thinking that through, it doesn't always go great.
Yeah. They're like, oh, now you want more money from me. But we never actually got the team using the platform during the onboarding process the way that you promised that they would.
Yeah, you guys.
So what you're describing is this very sequential process that people do. It's like 6 weeks onboarding, 6 months of adoption, and then we move to expansion. And if I'm hearing what you're inferring here, is instead these should almost be like parallel tracks, or at least jumping around from one to the other, not just like wait until we get to 6 months to talk expansion. or not feel like, hey, we did 6 weeks of onboarding, we're done. It should be something we revisit throughout the life of that contract.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, you can think about this as being analogous to the sales process. You would never say to someone, well, we already did the demo. I'm not going to give you any more examples or information. Like, this is an ongoing process. You're always looking to multi-thread. And so it's the same motion after you close. And I think one of the really under leveraged points for this is in your QBR. But, you also just need to think about who are the people that you need, who are all of the friends that you need to have in that account in a year? And then how are you starting those relationships now and continuing to drive them forward throughout the year?
So and you mentioned something, related to who are your friends when you were talking initially about onboarding and implementation and having these users involved, and that sometimes those buyers that are involved with the decision disappear, whether it's legal procurement, but it could also be the executive sponsor. It could be your product champion. And I've been in situations, I remember at Blend when we were implementing our software where, VP executive level up to the CRO said, we are going to use Blend for this process.
That's right.
And then we had to get the first pilot product. The first pilot rollout was 10 people and then eventually up to 60 with the full implementation. There was a point in time where we were live with 60 people. It was a full implementation. They're paying us $500,000 a year. And still 10%. It's like 5 or 6 of the 60 were still not using our software. They were still using the old system, to the point where the VP came out of his office and said, okay, everybody, it's Tuesday. By Friday, everybody must use Blend. Otherwise, you cannot work here. Wow. And it was like, okay, got it. By Friday, guess what happened?
Didn't happen.
Still had 5 or 6 people that still weren't using Blend. And do you really think he was going to let those people go? Heck no, because they were already overloaded.
Yeah.
So those people sometimes feel like, oh, I got to learn this new thing, and great for the executive sponsor. Wonderful. Now they have a dashboard of all of my activity. That's exactly what I want.
Totally. Yeah. Great dashboard. Wow. Cool.
Yeah. Now they can see how much activity I've been doing on my accounts every day.
Yeah. Shit. Oh, it integrates into this other system that I don't even use. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Great for finance. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So there's also that part where it's like, we are not often, honestly, I don't think that most salespeople are really, really equipped to sell to different end user personas in the sales process. And I certainly don't think that most account management and success teams are, because, there's this idea of, like you said, like they're spending $500,000 on this. The global EVP signed off. People are going to love it. And it's just not the case. I actually, one of my weirdest sales ever, I closed a $15,000 deal, which at that time was a really big deal at Panjiva. Like, we were selling like 4K or 10K annual subscriptions. And I closed a $15,000 subscription on one call with, it was like, I had the CEO, I had his executive team. I came in, I did the demo at 7 a.m. and he was like, great, we're going to do it. And I was like, now? Really? Okay. And I sent him the contract and he signed it, and that was it. No one ever used it. Never. No one ever didn't get it, didn't log in. And that was my fault. I ran that sales process wrong. I should not have let them close like that, even though, of course, I wanted to close that deal. I was like, great, this is the best hour I ever spent. And I think that's the other, and this is the part that people are really not going to like to hear, but there needs to be a lot more alignment between sales and the account management CS function pre-sale. You see it sometimes when you have a very technical product. I'm sure Blend had this. They had the pre-sales teams because your implementations were really intense. I remember my friend Keith talking about this when he was working with the CTO there. Even if you're selling a SaaS product that's like low code or no code, you still need to have a pre-sales strategy for starting to prep people for the process that's going to happen after they close. And bonus points, it actually helps you close more deals and close them faster, because anyone who's any kind of sophisticated buyer, like they know in the back of their mind, they have those stories too, right? They're like, oh, is this going to be like another Blend where like we spent so much money and we could use it? Although, I mean, that sounds like still a pretty high success rate for you guys. But if you can answer that question for them proactively in your sales process, it gives them so much more confidence in you as a company, you as a seller, and, in your team. But it so often doesn't happen. So what we've done really successfully a bunch of times is actually taken the demo, like from demo onward, once you start to feel like people have pretty high intent, and start asking them questions like, how are all of the different ways that you can see this being used at your company? And then take it a step further. Can we get some of those people on the next call? Like, can we give them a little, one of the things that we did at AllTrue is we actually did a mini implementation in the sales process. So we would get a user group of, like 5 people, and then we would do like a little mini onboarding call with them. It was a really easy to use product. We would have them download the app, they would create content. And then when we went back and we did the executive demo, we would demo their team's own content to them. And
I
people
love that.
loved it.
Yep.
Yeah. Because they
Yep.
could see immediately like, oh my gosh, this is how we can use it. It would start to get their creative juices flowing. They could think of so many other ways that they wanted to apply this. And they kind of felt like they had already gotten something from us. So they sort of felt like, well, we should pay for it because we're already using it, type of thing. And
Yep.
it took us, about an hour and a half to do this. And then the great thing is that we already had relationships with people, and they loved the way the videos looked, and they loved seeing their own content. And then they were really excited to start talking to us, after the deal closed. So it's like, every company can come up with a little delight moment like that will start warming up those relationships for you, so that you're
Yep.
not that person that's just being dropped into their lap that now they have to like make extra time out of their day for.
Yeah. So, and as we wrap up here in the next couple of minutes, there's a couple of like, I guess maybe if you could be really prescriptive here, even if you have to speak for generalities, because I know every company is a little bit different. You mentioned this idea of like you have to find out who your friends are.
Yeah.
Who are the friends you need in a year? So if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking through, okay, well, Monica says I have to find out who the friends are
Yeah.
in a year. What are some ways that you suggest people, one, identifying I think is a little bit easier, because if you're selling appropriately, you'd understand the stakeholders and people influencing, who would be influenced by the decision. But what about like, how do you actually start building relationships with people that may be in another division that you did not have contact with, that come renewal time, you're going to need them to both use the platform that you're
Yep.
selling and get the sign off or be the opportunity to upsell? So that's one question I have. What are a couple of things that somebody could do to start mapping out and making those friends?
It's a great question. I mean, I would say that it's probably a lot of the things that your sales team is already doing. You have the added benefit of having information, relationships, and data about the company. Like, how amazing would it be as a salesperson if every company that you sold to, you already had talked to people there, you had like actual data about them, or content that they had created, or whatever it is that your product does, and you had people that could introduce you. Candidly, I think there's no reason that a team should not be able to do this. If you can sell to that company, you can create that expansion motion, but you have to take the time to do it, and you have to not think about it as an existing account. In a way, you have to think about it as a white space where you already have a foothold. They don't owe you anything just because that company is already using your product. There's 500 to 5,000 people that work there. They might not care at all about what the person in the London office is doing, right?
Yeah.
But it's your intro point. And so
I love that idea, that concept.
yeah. And they might, like, sometimes you get warm intros and it's amazing, but not every company works like that. And so you don't want to be at the mercy of how their internal politics work, right? And like how their communication works internally. That's not your problem. What you do want to do is you want to start to glean information and glean leverage points from all of your interactions, and then take that to drive your conversations forward. And I mean, you have like, depending on the level of person that you're reaching out to and how close you are to them, how many degrees of removal you are, you might want to come in and be like, hey, we just signed a contract with you guys, and I'm really excited to talk to you about how this is going to play out for you. Or you can literally reach out to them cold. I've also had teams do this and then say, oh, by the way, I've been working with Scott in your London office, and maybe not even exactly how, because if you go too much, if you make too much of an assumption based on the existing relationship, and then that doesn't mean anything to them, they're going to be like, not my problem. Like,
that's true. You don't even know if that London division, or that, let's say you're selling to Scott in London and you're trying to now spin up the sale into the New York office, and you detail, these are all the things we did for the London office. The New York person will be like,
I don't do any of that.
good. I'm
Yeah.
glad because that guy's
Keep
really
doing
screwed
that.
up.
Sounds like
Like
they've got
Scott and
it.
London
Yeah.
needed your help. Like we're good. Like we don't need
Right.
that. Like he should have been fired 2 years ago. He's lucky to have had you in the
Yeah,
first place. Like we're fine. We got our shit together here. Right. You just don't
totally.
know.
You just don't know.
And so I love that idea and just like giving yourself permission, but treating that person like you would. And if you're prospecting into a new company, you
Hmm.
can't just assume because I talked to one person in the company that I can just say, hey, I talked to, Monica over in your sales department. She's your head of sales. And she said
Yep.
that you have all of these problems when it comes to marketing. And then I
Yep.
call the marketing person and I'm like, hey, this is all the things Monica said. I'd love to get on a call and help you with those things.
They're like, we're doing
And the marketing person is like, no, I think we're okay. Monica is the one
good
that screwed
things.
up because we're feeding her all the leads and her team can't close them.
Can't close them. Yeah. Good. I'm
Marketing's
glad.
not the problem. Sales is the problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Good luck with Monica. We'll talk to you
Yeah.
later. Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So it
Okay.
just comes down to taking a step back and just not making assumptions. Like you said, not making assumptions about the relationship, your executive sponsor. If you don't give them a reason to show up to your biweekly calls, they will not show up to your biweekly calls. Maybe you need to have a different call with that person where you're talking to them about, sort of like high level what you're doing with their end users. And you have to figure out a different strategy for everybody to keep them engaged.
Okay, I love those. I love those tips. And then the second question, we'll get you out on this, which is, and I know this is probably a 3-month implementation for you if somebody was going to hire you for this, but you talked about these 3 phases: onboarding, one, number 2, adoption, number 3, expansion, and how those should run concurrently, not sequentially.
Yes.
What are like 1 or 2 or 3 things that somebody could do now to start thinking about adopting what you're describing here, as opposed to running it very sequentially?
Mhm. Yeah. So what I would think about is, again, think about where you want to be in a year or 2 years or 5 years, depending on what your time scale is, and then work backwards from there. So
Mm,
what's the end goal? And then think about what are, like, I call them synthesis moments. Like what are the highlight moments that you need to have in the next 3 to 12 months in order for you to be able to arrive at that point. So they need to get this win. They need to be able to see this information. Okay, how are we going to be able to get that data? Well, we need to get this team really, really, really jazzed. How are we going to do that? Right? We want to move into APAC. All right, well, that means that we're probably going to need to start talking to those people in the next 3 months. So that means for the next 3 months, my job is to start, reaching out on LinkedIn, inviting them to our webinars, sending them gifts, like, whatever it is that your company is able to do to get in touch with people. And then you just have success points and kind of a rough timeline for each of those threads. And you literally just, plot it out like a project
yeah.
plan.
Yeah, I love that concept of highlight moments. It reminded me, I have a 10-year-old son and we play Mario Kart on the Sony or on the Nintendo Switch. And they have this function that after you finish your Grand Prix and whoever wins, like, which is always my son, of course, he's like, wait, we want to watch the highlights. And then they actually show parts of the Grand Prix where he's like bombing somebody or taking them out, or when he takes, and it's like the highlight moment, and he gets to relive that. And so it's a concept that we understand, like the highlight reel. And you're saying,
Yeah.
like, if I was going to go forward, what do I want that highlight reel to look like in
Yes.
6 months or 12 months time? So that if I'm playing it back to the prospect when it comes renewal time, I can point to like, hey, remember in month 3, we did this, and month 6, you got that win. In month 9, you use this data in your internal report and you got this extra budget because you had the data to support the expenditure request.
Yeah.
So that highlight reel concept is really, really great. I love those highlight moments.
Totally.
Because that's like a peak experience for people within the use.
Exactly. And there's different peak experiences for your end users, for your champions, and for your executive sponsors. And you have to make it really easy for them. I guess in another session, we could talk about how to do this in a QBR because they will not remember. I know you think that your auto dialer is the thing that is revolutionizing their entire sales org, but like it's not. They have like 20 other tools. And just one part of their job. So you have to really make that stand out.
You're a good salesperson because you just future pace me. You're like, oh, and the next one. I would love to do a part 2 or part 3. There's so much we didn't get to, the multiple sheets of notes that you sent over. So how can people get in touch with you if they want to jam more with you or get your help looking at their, whether it's account management process or other parts of their sales function? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Monica?
Absolutely. There's 2 ways. If you send me a DM on LinkedIn, I will always respond to those within about a day. Or you guys can just send me an email. It's monica@fivelimes.com. I do have some really good frameworks for this that I'm happy to share with anybody. And I would love to hear how people are doing this at their companies. I know it's something that is really top of mind for a lot of people this year. So yeah, happy to jam on this with anyone that wants to go a little bit deeper.
And that's Monica at 5. Is it written out the word 5 or the number
It's
5?
Monica at number 5 IVElimes.com.
Number 5 IVE limes, thecitrusfruit.com. So we'll make sure we have that in the show notes as well. And if you're listening, you can just pull up a draft of an email right now and just type in Monica at 5, number 5 IVElimes.com. Yep. And then just put podcast in the subject and then type and just say, hey, can we have a chat? And then I'm sure you can pick it up from there. If that's okay. I'm not to flood your inbox or anything, but I'm always thinking about people that are listening to this and they want to take action. Take your phone out. You're probably listening to this on your mobile device. Peck out an email right now, get it done, and then she'll get back to you. And then you guys can have a conversation.
100%.
Cool. Monica, thank you so much. I know we're up at the top of the hour and you got to jam to your next thing. So thanks for taking the time to prepare and spend this time and expertise with us. And yes, I'm looking forward to part 2 for sure.
Me too, Scott. Thanks. This has been great.
See you, Monica. Cheers. Bye.
Take care.
All right, that's a wrap. I promise you that was a lot of information at the start of the episode to pack into about 45 minutes of time. And I don't think I disappointed there. So make sure that if you have liked this episode, if you've loved this episode, then 3 things I'd love for you to do. Number 1, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this show. Leave us a review. It helps us know how we're doing, and it helps other people just like you find the show. That's what one of the key components for Spotify and Apple Podcasts and these other platforms, that they use those reviews as a way to encourage other people just like you to find the show and listen to episodes. So that would be one thing that would help. Number 2, if you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you subscribe. We're going to have many more episodes coming up over the course of the coming weeks and months and years, so you don't want to miss an episode. So make sure you subscribe so you get notified every single time we've got a new expert like Monica or another episode coming onto the show. And the third thing is tell a friend or 10. If you listen to this episode, if you've got somebody else that you know has been struggling with account management, or you got a co-founder, if you've got a friend that's a head of customer success, somebody else that you know that could benefit from this particular topic, this episode, shoot them an email, shoot them a text, share this episode with them. Say, hey, just listen to this great podcast from Scott Sambucci and Monica Stewart. You should check it out. Viral is still the number 1 way for podcasts to increase their listenership. And I would love to get the word out via word of mouth, meaning your mouth. So use your mouth, use your text, use your emails to let people know about the show. Love seeing more and more subscribers, love seeing episodes getting downloaded, because it tells us that you're appreciating and getting value from what we're doing each and every day. So that's it for now. Again, one last thing I'll mention, if you have not yet requested a time for a situation session with me, shoot me an email, scott@salesqualia.com, scott@salesqualia.com. Type private into the subject line, and my assistant will help us find a 20-minute jam session to work on sales for your startup. All right, that's it for now. Thanks so much for listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci, and we will chat again next time. See ya.